They didn't just win. They made winning look like art. A blur of red and blue dances across the pitch. One pass, then another, then 10 more. The ball never stops. Neither does the applause. Messi cuts inside. 3 defenders gone. Guardiola clenches both fists on the sideline like he's conducting an orchestra only he can hear. A triangle of passes. Then a goal. Another. Trophies stacked like dominoes. But what they built wasn't just dominance. It was dangerous. Inside the locker room, the tension grows. Tito Vilanova fights a different battle. Neymar arrives. The team fractures. Guardiola walks away. The world watches, stunned. As Bayern puts 7 past them, Messi doesn't flinch. Because what came before was football at its purest, and what followed was the price of chasing perfection. This wasn't just a golden generation. It was a system so beautiful it couldn't survive its own genius. This is the story of how a team conquered football, rewrote its laws, collapsed under its own weight, and left behind a legacy that will never be touched. This is the story of the team that didn't just conquer football. They changed what football could be. It didn't begin with Messi, or Guardiola, or even a ball. It began with a Swiss man and a newspaper ad. In 1899, a 21-year-old named Joan Gamper placed a small classified in a local Barcelona paper. Wanted, players for a new football club. From that one sentence came one of the greatest institutions in the history of sport. FC Barcelona was born, not just as a team, but as an identity. It didn't take long for football to fuse with something bigger. Catalonia was restless, Spain was centralized, and Barca became a symbol, not just of sport, but of defiance. Under Franco's regime, speaking Catalan was illegal, so people sang their language in the stands. The team became a protest in motion. Every goal felt like resistance, every win a declaration. That's why they weren't called just a club. They were called Masculine Club, more than a club. It wasn't marketing, it was survival. As the decades passed, the club grew in stature, but it also grew in contradiction. Their identity was beautiful, their football wasn't always. Until 1973. That's when Johan Cruyff arrived, a Dutch rebel with a sharp tongue and a sharper brain. He didn't just play the game, he saw the matrix inside it. He changed how Barcelona played, and more importantly, how they thought. Cruyff returned in the 1990s as a manager, and this time, he built something revolutionary. The Dream Team. Stoichkov, Koeman, Guardiola. They won La Liga 4 years in a row. In 1992, they lifted their first European Cup at Wembley. But Cruyff's biggest contribution wasn't silverware. It was philosophy. He believed in width, in movement, in intelligence. The ball had to do the running, and every player had to think like a midfielder. To make that vision real, Cruyff helped create a factory, a place where the next generation would be trained not just to play, but to think. La Masia. At first, it was just a dormitory. By the time the 2000s arrived, it was the mind of the club. But philosophy doesn't guarantee stability. By the mid-2000s, Barca had entered another cycle. In 2003, Joan Laporta was elected club president and promised a return to ideals. His first move? Hire a new manager, Frank Rijkaard. His second? Sign a Brazilian magician who played with a smile that could melt iron, Ronaldinho. He didn't walk onto the pitch, he danced across it. Stepovers, no looks, back heels, every touch felt like jazz. In 2005 and 2006, Barcelona won back-to-back league titles. Then came the big one, the 2006 Champions League, their first in 14 years. At the peak of that glory, something else quietly happened. A 19-year-old named Lionel Messi scored his first Champions League goal. He didn't celebrate wildly. He just ran to Ronaldinho and hugged him. What came next was less romantic. By 2007, the magic had dulled. Rijkaard lost the locker room, Ronaldinho's form dipped, his nightlife made headlines, he was photographed leaving clubs hours before training. And when training came, Rijkaard didn't seem to care. One story claimed he barely spoke during sessions. Players began to drift. The team had no structure, no pressing, no plan. They finished third in the league. Then again, the same players who had dazzled now looked disconnected, disjointed, done. And through it all, there was this kid, scrawny, quiet, barely 5'7", but he had a gravity the others didn't. Defenders leaned towards him. Fans held their breath when he touched the ball. You could see it. Messi wasn't following the team's rhythm. He was quietly becoming it. In a mostly forgotten February match against Levante in 2008, he beat 4 defenders and slotted it past the keeper. Nobody knew it yet, but that run was the beginning of a revolution. The magic was gone, the identity was fading, and the world was watching. Barcelona still had the philosophy, the academy, the prodigy, the tradition. They had the pieces. They just needed someone to rearrange the board.
We hope this season to get more successful.
They had the pieces. They just needed someone to rearrange the board. In the early 1990s, Pep Guardiola wasn't just a player. He was a conduit. Cruyff called him the brain. Not the fastest, not the strongest, but Guardiola played like he had a map while everyone else guessed the directions. He moved the ball quickly, quietly, without ego. A midfielder who didn't dominate games, he directed them. In 1992, under Cruyff's dream team, he helped Barcelona win their first European Cup. It was the beginning of a golden era. But even then, Pep wasn't just absorbing the game. He was dissecting it, taking notes in silence, watching Cruyff move pieces like a grandmaster, listening to every word. Because Guardiola didn't just dream of playing the game. He wanted to understand it. After his playing days ended, he vanished from the spotlight. But not from the game. He traveled, observed, studied. He became obsessed with the teachings of Juan Malillo and Marcelo Bielsa, 2 men who saw football not as sport, but as structure, geometry, philosophy. While others watched games, Guardiola watched space. While others diagrammed positions, he questioned movement. He wasn't studying formations, he was studying thought. In 2007, he returned to Barcelona, not to manage the stars, but to train the forgotten. He took over Barcelona B, a youth squad stuck in Spain's 4th division. Most saw it as a footnote. Pep treated it like a laboratory. He installed positional play, forced teenagers to think 3 passes ahead. He didn't shout, he questioned. He demanded understanding. Players were benched for misplacing a pass, not missing a goal. And within a year, Barcelona B had won the Tercera division and earned promotion. But what came next wasn't a promotion, it was a revolution. In 2008, Barcelona was collapsing. Ronaldinho was partying more than training. The squad looked old, bloated, lost. The obvious choice to fix it.
Barcelona, Valdés, Belletti, Puyol, Marquez, Giovanni, Albertini, Deco, Xavi, Eto'o, Juli, Ronaldinho.
Was José Mourinho, the most pragmatic, battle-tested manager in Europe. Ruthless, results-driven, available. While Mourinho sent PowerPoints, Guardiola handed in principles. Laporta didn't want a manager. He wanted an idea.
He went with Guardiola.
So he took the biggest risk in modern football. He hired Pep Guardiola, a man who had never coached in the top division, a man who insisted on values over star power, a man, when offered the job, told Laporta, "If I don't win, you can sack me." Guardiola wasn't hired because he promised victories. He was hired because he believed in something. Most managers talk tactics. Pep talked about the soul of the game. He believed football could be pure, that beauty wasn't optional, it was the point. That players should move in synchrony like instruments in an orchestra. That possession wasn't control for control's sake, but a way to make the opponent suffer. Pep wasn't a tactician first. He was a philosopher with a ball. And now, he'd been handed the club he loved. Broken, brilliant, and waiting to be transformed. What came next wasn't just a new system, it was a new language. And the world would soon have to learn how to speak it.
Benvinguts a aquesta temporada, benvinguts a casa nostra, apreteu-vos els cinturons que ens ho passarem bé.
What came next wasn't just a new system, it was a new language. Pep Guardiola's first move as Barcelona manager wasn't tactical, it was surgical. Ronaldinho was gone. Deco was gone. The past had been beautiful, but it had also been bloated. Pep didn't just want to win. He wanted purity. And for that, he needed discipline. Samuel Eto'o, the club's most lethal striker, was nearly cut as well. But Pep kept him. Not because he fit the system, but because he burned for it. The rest would be built from scratch. Guardiola brought with him two kids from the B team. Sergio Busquets, a tall, lanky midfielder who didn't look like a footballer, but moved like one. And Pedro, a wiry winger who pressed like a man with something to prove. Both were unknown, both became essential. The training ground became an engine room. Every session emphasized positioning, anticipation, reaction. And one rule echoed louder than the rest. Win the ball back within 6 seconds. If you lose the ball, Pep told his players, you can't let them breathe. If they lost possession, they didn't fall back. They swarmed. They hunted in threes. Chaos wasn't feared, it was planned for. And in the eye of that storm, Guardiola placed his masterpiece, Lionel Messi. Until now, Messi had played out wide, where defenders could pin him to the touchline. But Pep saw something else. He moved him inside, into the shadows between defenders, a space no one had owned, a role with no name. It became known as the false nine, and it broke football. Center backs didn't know whether to follow him or hold their line. Midfielders didn't know whether to mark him or look over their shoulder. While they hesitated, Messi drifted, and when the moment came, he exploded. Barcelona didn't just control games, they consumed them. By spring, the system was fully alive. The pressing, the passing, the positional play, it was all synchronized, like a machine that dreamed in triangles. And then came Madrid. May 2nd, 2009. The Santiago Bernabéu, a title race, a rivalry, a reckoning. Real Madrid struck first. Then Barcelona dismantled them. Messi, playing centrally, dropped into midfield and tore the game open. Pass, move, touch, goal. It ended 6-2 at their home in front of their fans. It wasn't just a win, it was a statement. We play the game, you chase it. Weeks later, they lifted the league title, then the Copa del Rey, and then came Rome. The 2009 UEFA Champions League final. Manchester United, Cristiano Ronaldo, Sir Alex Ferguson. The plan was clear. Overload the midfield, choke the space, make United play a game they weren't prepared for. From kickoff, it worked. Xavi and Iniesta dictated everything. Busquets kept the base tight, and Messi, playing centrally, was untouchable. He even scored with his head, 5'7", against Rio Ferdinand and Nemanja Vidic. When the whistle blew, the score was 2-0. But the gap felt wider, because this wasn't just domination, it was evolution. Barcelona scored 105 goals in La Liga that season and won the treble, La Liga, Copa del Rey, and the UEFA Champions League in Pep Guardiola's first year as a top-flight manager. No Spanish team had ever done it. But the trophies weren't what made it historic. It was how they won. With elegance, with geometry, with fury. Control through chaos, beauty through ruthlessness. And this was just the beginning. The treble had made them immortal, but immortality comes with a weight. Barcelona entered the 2009-10 season not just as champions, but as a benchmark. Every opponent played them differently now. More cautious, more compact, more cynical. Parking the bus wasn't just a strategy, it was survival. So Pep evolved. Again. Samuel Eto'o, the warrior who scored in 2 Champions League finals, was sent to Inter Milan. In return came Zlatan Ibrahimovic, a 6'5" hurricane of ego and elegance. On paper, it was terrifying. Messi and Ibrahimovic on the same team? Unstoppable. On the pitch, it was friction. Zlatan wasn't false anything. He was a classic 9, demanding space, wanting the ball to revolve around him. But this Barcelona didn't revolve. It pulsed. It flowed. It suffocated. And slowly, it started to tilt back towards Messi. Tactically, Pep began reshaping the field. Opponents now dropped 10 men behind the ball. So Barca adjusted with width, overload, and vertical passing lanes. And it wasn't just Tiki-Taka anymore. It was pressure applied with precision. Messi thrived. He scored 47 goals that season and won his first Ballon d'Or.
Un jugador de Barcelona, de la selección argentina, que tiene ganas de seguir consiguiendo cosas, de poder conseguir títulos.
But while the football stayed elegant, something else was wearing thin. Pep. The expectations, the repetition, the microscope.
Barcelona's the best team playing the best football on the planet.
Every win felt required. Every draw, a failure. His press conferences got shorter.
Without the Dream Team 92, we would not be here.
His eyes darker, his answers tighter. Perfection had become routine, and routine had become exhausting. Then came Inter. Champions League semifinal. Pep versus Mourinho.
Mota and Cambiasso and Schneider, Eto'o and Pandev and Diego Milito.
Barcelona were flat. Inter were ruthless. They pressed, fouled, countered, disrupted. They didn't try to beat Tiki-Taka. They tried to break it. Inter won 3-1. Pep was furious, not just at the result, but at how they were beat. He believed football was supposed to be played with purpose. Inter played it with poison. The second leg at Camp Nou was a siege. Inter sat deep, 2 banks of 4, barely crossing midfield. Barcelona passed and passed and passed. 84% possession. 1 goal. Not enough. Inter advanced to the final. And Barcelona were left with the ball and nothing else. At one point, as the sprinklers turned on, Mourinho stood on the pitch, arms wide, soaking in the booze like a curtain call. They had played beautifully and lost. The season wasn't a failure. They won La Liga, the Club World Cup, the UEFA Super Cup. But something had shifted. Zlatan had come for glory. He left with silence. Beauty was no longer enough, not when resistance came armed with realism. When beauty meets resistance, how far do you bend before you break?
No era solo el ganar, sino cómo se hacía. Y la gente pues nos ha tenido y nos tiene muchísima admiración.
They didn't just return, they ascended. Zlatan Ibrahimovic was gone, traded to AC Milan after one tempestuous season. No headlines, no farewell, just absence. And in that vacuum, something magnificent took shape. What remained wasn't chaos, it was clarity. Pep Guardiola's Barcelona began the 2010-11 season with pure alignment. Every pass had a purpose. Every movement was part of the code. They didn't just dominate, they dictated. At the center of it all, Messi, Xavi, Iniesta. 3 men, 1 rhythm. Xavi pulsed. Iniesta glided. Messi exploded. Behind them, Busquets wasn't just a safety net. He was a compass, receiving under pressure, turning chaos into geometry. The triangle was no longer a passing pattern. It was a philosophy. La Masia wasn't just producing players. It was producing fluency. In July, Spain lifted the World Cup. 7 of the starting 11 had come through Barcelona's academy. The team wore red, but the football? It wasn't Spain lifting the trophy. It was a classroom from Catalonia. Back in club football, Barcelona didn't just lead the league, they rewrote it. Opponents stopped trying to win. They tried to survive. And then came the resistance. Jose Mourinho, now at Real Madrid, he wasn't there to admire beauty. He came to dismantle it. Clásicos turned into battlegrounds, psychological warfare, tactical chess, emotional trench fights, sideline stare-downs, off-ball elbows, flashball press conferences. It was football at its most brilliant and its most brutal. Then came April, Champions League semifinal, Barcelona versus Real Madrid, again. The first leg at the Bernabéu was suffocating. Frustrations, fouls, and in the 61st minute, Pepe lunged at Dani Alves. The ref reached for red. Real were down to 10. Mourinho exploded. Pep stayed still. Then came the silence. Then came Messi. He scored once. Then again, gliding past 5 defenders, finishing with a touch so soft it felt like a signature. A solo run that defied physics. A moment that defied logic. The second leg was a formality. Barcelona advanced. Wembley awaited. May 28, 2011, Champions League final. Barcelona versus Manchester United. Again. Same teams, different dimension. From the opening whistle, Barcelona didn't just control the match, they orchestrated it. United were bystanders, chasing shadows, watching triangles materialize and disappear. At halftime, Wayne Rooney looked to the bench, like a man asking for a map. Messi scored. So did Pedro. So did Villa. Final score, 3-1. But the numbers didn't matter, because this wasn't football. This was art. Sir Alex Ferguson, beaten and breathless, said it plainly.
Well, I think that great teams do go in cycles. And the cycle they're in at the moment is the best in Europe, there's no question about that.
They're the best team I've ever faced. They won La Liga, they won the Champions League, they won the Spanish Super Cup. But more than that, they reached something unreachable. The game had reached its purest form and became impossible to replicate.
El 80% de tiempo la pelota contra el 20% del rival, decís, qué jugador. Y tenés a Messi, más todavía.
We are the best team ever.
The season began with silverware, again. They dismantled Porto in the Super Cup. They toyed with Santos in the Club World Cup. But something felt different. It wasn't the results, it was the rhythm. The triangle still spun, the pressing still hummed. But the spaces between movements grew longer. The reactions a half step slower. The sharpness ever so slightly dulled. And on the touchline, Pep Guardiola no longer looked like a conductor.
Sometimes you forget that this is the game 11-11 with one ball.
He looked like a man waiting for silence. His eyes were tired. His voice was slower. The fire hadn't gone out, but it was flickering. Inside the core, Messi, Xavi, Iniesta, there was still brilliance. But now it had to be summoned. It no longer flowed on command. Guardiola responded the only way he knew how. More ideas. Inverted fullbacks, false fullbacks, interior wingers, rotating pivots, half spaces within half spaces. Sometimes it felt like evolution, sometimes like a system solving itself to death. Then came the blow no tactics could fix. In November, Tito Vilanova was diagnosed with cancer. Pep's confidant, his mirror, the man who whispered sense into complexity. The locker room kept going. The games continued. But something beneath the surface broke and stayed broken. By spring, the results followed. In the Champions League semifinal, Barcelona faced Chelsea, a team built not to dance, but to endure. The first leg at Stamford Bridge was a siege. Barca had 72% possession. 2 shots hit the post. Chelsea scored with their only shot. 1-0. The second leg was more brutal. At Camp Nou, Barcelona led 2-0. Chelsea were down to 10 men. The final was in sight. Then, unraveling. A counterattack. A goal. Messi missed a penalty, and the game slipped through their hands. Chelsea advanced. Barcelona stood stunned. Their cathedral had fallen silent. In La Liga, it was already over. Mourinho's Real Madrid didn't just win the title, they shattered it. 100 points. A record. Barcelona finished second, exhausted. Then came the press conference. Pep Guardiola sat at the mic, looked up and said quietly, 4 years. That's an eternity at Barcelona. He was leaving. Not because he failed, but because perfection had finished consuming itself. They still won the Copa del Rey, still held trophies in their hands. But this time, they didn't lift them to the sky. They held them like memories. Because perfection is unsustainable. Even gods need rest.
I fins aviat, que a mi no em perdreu mai.
Tito Vilanova didn't try to revolutionize anything. He didn't need to. He simply reached into the drawer and pulled out the old blueprints. The blueprint hadn't changed, but the architect was gone. For months, it worked. Barcelona flew out of the gates. Messi was untouchable. He wasn't just scoring. He was erasing the idea of what scoring looked like. In the calendar year of 2012, he put away 91 goals, an all-time world record. The rhythm returned. By January, Barcelona had won 18 of their first 19 league games. The system didn't just survive Pep's exit. It seemed to thrive without him. But beneath the beauty, something had started to rot. In December, the news broke. Tito's cancer had returned. He left the team mid-season for treatment in New York. Barcelona kept playing. But something in the soul of the club was missing. Jordi Roura took over temporarily, but the sharpness dulled again. Pressing turned passive. Triangles became flatter. Players looked to each other for leadership, but none of them had been built to lead. They had always followed. And in the shadows, a new monster was waiting. Bayern Munich. Unlike Chelsea, Bayern didn't resist Barcelona's ideas. They hunted them down and dismantled them. First leg, Allianz Arena, 4-0. Barcelona barely touched the ball, and when they did, it felt like Bayern had borrowed their choreography and weaponized it. Second leg, Camp Nou. Messi didn't even start, 3-0. Across 180 minutes, Barcelona managed just 2 shots on goal. Bayern had 7 goals and barely broke a sweat. It wasn't just a tactical collapse, it was symbolic. The blueprint had stopped working. Something else had taken it, evolved it, and used it to destroy the master. Inside the locker room, the silence turned into whispers. Someone said Tito's absence had left a vacuum. Others blamed aging legs or a system that refused to evolve. But no one said it out loud. The era was ending, and they didn't know how to stop it. And yet, they still won La Liga, 100 points, a record equaling total. On paper, it looked like dominance. In reality, it was the quietest title they'd ever celebrated. Because greatness doesn't disappear overnight, it decays from the inside, silently, painfully. Barcelona had always been a cathedral, but this season, it felt like someone handed them the blueprint in a foreign language. Gerard Tata Martino wasn't just new, he was alien, a quiet Argentine with no European pedigree, no La Masia roots, and no ties to the club's past. His appointment wasn't vision. It was a favor, a phone call from Messi's father. And that set the tone. Politics first, philosophy second. Then came Neymar, signed for stardom, unveiled with fireworks, smiles for the cameras. But behind the curtain, something reeked. Barcelona claimed the fee was 57.1 million euros, with 40 million euros going straight to Neymar's father's company. But as investors dug deeper, the real cost ballooned to over 86 million euros, scattered across hidden clauses, youth partnerships, friendly match obligations, and opaque corporate channels. It wasn't just sketchy, it was criminal. Spain's tax authorities launched a formal investigation. They accused the club of tax fraud, falsified filings, and misrepresentation of payments. Bernabéu and his predecessor, Sandro Rosell, denied wrongdoing. But both were formally charged in court. Both were forced to testify.
I think my time here is over.
And Rosell, facing mounting pressure, resigned. Not with a bang, with a shadow. Inside the club, trust collapsed. Outside, the headlines ask a question no fan ever wanted to read. Messi club? Or more than a lie? This was supposed to be a rebirth. Instead, it became a requiem. Messi missed 2 months with injury. When he returned, he looked hollow. Less fire, more fatigue. Some whispered he was disgusted with the board. Others said he was just tired of carrying ghosts. Neymar didn't lack brilliance. He lacked a place. Caught between Messi's gravity and his own ambition, between shadow and spotlight, Martino tried to hold it together, but the players didn't believe. They played for him. They didn't play through him. Possession still existed, but sterile. Movement flickered, but aimless.
I think they're less than normal.
Johan Cruyff, once the architect of it all, spoke plainly. This club has lost its way. No La Liga, no Copa del Rey, no Champions League. Just static. Barcelona finished second in the league, 1 point behind Atletico Madrid, and in the final match of the season at Camp Nou, they had a chance to win it all. They drew 1-1. Atletico celebrated on Barcelona's grass. Martino stood still on the touchline. No rage, no tears, just silence. And then, the silence deepened. Tito Vilanova was gone. April 25th. Quietly, bravely, too soon. He had fought with grace, led with dignity. He wasn't just a coach. He was the conscience of a generation. And now that conscience had vanished. The cracks weren't hidden anymore. They were structural, and they were spreading. For a moment, it felt like the dynasty was dust. A fractured locker room, a president exiled, a legacy in question. But that summer, Barcelona placed one final bet. They hired Luis Enrique, a former Barca captain, a fighter, and a fire starter. He wasn't here to preserve the past. He came to ignite something new. From day one, there was tension. He benched Messi. He clashed with egos. He demanded discipline in a room full of legends. And when he challenged the king, the club nearly tore itself in two. Then came Luis Suarez, a striker still wiping blood from his legacy. Banned for 4 months after biting Chiellini at the World Cup, Suarez arrived not just controversial, but radioactive. For the first few months, it didn't work. Messi drifted wide, Neymar wandered, Suarez waited. And Luis Enrique, he nearly walked. But then it happened. A closed-door meeting. No cameras, no quotes, just clarity.
For me, this is a very nice and special day. A day in which I think we will start to build a new Barca. A Barca that will be back to the centre of attention and that will achieve everything we look forward to.
And from that moment forward, the team didn't play for Luis Enrique. They played with him. The formation shifted. Messi to the right, Suarez through the center, Neymar wide and wild. And suddenly, it clicked. The MSN era had begun. Barcelona didn't play football. They devoured it. The goals came like avalanches, sweeping, brutal, beautiful. Messi with the glide, Suarez with the bite, Neymar with the flash. And while the world watched the front three, Sergio Busquets rebuilt the machine behind them. The triangles returned. The pressing returned. So did the joy. In Europe, they went on a tour of vengeance. Manchester City, Paris Saint-Germain, Bayern Munich. Pep Guardiola returned to the Camp Nou only to be destroyed by his own creation. Barcelona shredded Bayern 3-0 in the first leg, with Messi twisting Boateng into folklore. Even Pep could only shrug and say, they were unstoppable. That's all I can say. And then, Berlin, Juventus. Tacticians, survivors, champions. But Barcelona had evolved. They didn't need 70% possession anymore. They needed 3 weapons and a mission. Rakitic scored early, Suarez slashed through, and Neymar sealed it in stoppage time. 3-1. Barcelona were champions of Europe again. The treble had returned just 6 years after the first. And as Xavi Hernandez walked off the pitch one final time, armband on, legacy secured. He didn't raise his voice, he raised the trophy. Not as a goodbye, but as a reminder of everything they had built. Barcelona had risen from their own wreckage. New faces, same soul. And for one last time, the football was perfect.
You've been really important to me. Thank you very much to everyone.
O sea, el F.C. Barcelona, fundado en el 1899, es un club de los mejores del mundo, que ha ganado títulos siempre y que con Leo Messi, evidentemente, y con sus compañeros ganó muchos títulos. Y es evidente que ha habido una reacción maravillosa.
Great empires don't explode, they erode. Barcelona's dynasty didn't collapse with thunder. It unraveled. Quietly, painfully, in full view. The first thread was Xavi, the architect of tempo, the human metronome. He left in 2015 with a trophy in one hand and the playbook in the other. Then came Neymar. In 2017, he didn't just leave, he detonated the future. Paris paid 222 million euros not to buy a player, but to rip a soul from its system. Barcelona didn't rebuild, they panicked. Coutinho, Dembele, Griezmann, hundreds of millions spent in chaos. None fit, none worked. None replaced the void. They weren't signings, they were symptoms. Suarez aged, Iniesta faded. La Masia, once the club's conscience, turned silent. And Messi? He stayed. He scored 50 goals. He wore the armband like armor. Changed positions, hunted miracles. But he couldn't stop the rot. Because the rot ran deeper. In the boardroom, it was civil war. President Josep Maria Bartomeu ran the club like a cover-up factory. PR stunts, wage balloons, scandals. The Neymar deal exploded in court. Spain's tax authorities charged Bartomeu and Rosell with fraud. Rosell resigned. Bartomeu stayed. Trust vanished. So did the structure. Then came Lisbon. August 14, 2020. Champions League quarterfinal. Barcelona versus Bayern Munich. By halftime, it was over. By full time, 8-2. Bayern didn't just beat Barcelona. They humiliated them. They dissected them using their own blueprints and burned the pieces. No one screamed. No one believed. Because deep down, they knew this wasn't a bad night. This was the funeral. Messi didn't flinch, but he sent a fax. He wanted out. Not for legacy, not for rings, because the numbers didn't add up. Barcelona, the club that built him, couldn't afford to keep him. And when he left in 2021, he didn't hold a press conference. He cried and walked away. Not from a club, from a dynasty, from a dream, from ruins. Barcelona didn't die in a match. It died when swagger turned to silence, when belief turned to bureaucracy, when La Masia turned into a museum. When Messi cried, He wasn't breaking the system. He was showing us it was already broken.
I always said that Messi has some talent that no one has.
Who's the best player of all time? Lionel Messi.
The best is Messi. Messi's number 9, number 10, number 11, number 7, number 6, number 5, number 4.
He's definitely one of the greatest players of all time.
That's my ranking. Lionel's for me the best.
I think Messi is one of a kind.
For me, genius.
I think Messi is the best player in the world.
The clock ran out, the stadium empty. But Tiki-Taka didn't die in Barcelona. It traveled. It crossed borders, hidden in the mind of Pep Guardiola. In Munich, he inherited machines, precise, ruthless, engineered for efficiency. He tried to teach them poetry. Passes grew sharper, lines tightened. But he learned something too. Elegance without verticality becomes predictable. Beauty alone breaks.
Ladies and gentlemen, your manager, Pep Guardiola!
Then he crossed the channel to Manchester, to City, and that's where it bloomed again. Not as a copy, as an evolution. It had inverted fullbacks, false tens, full pitch equations. It looked nothing like the 2009 Barcelona side, but it breathed the same philosophy. Control the ball, control the game. And Pep wasn't alone. The world adapted, or tried to. Klopp turned chaos into a weapon. Mourinho perfected the counter trap. Simeone pressed pause on possession. Tiki-Taka didn't fade. It provoked transformation. But through all of it, one figure stood at the center. Messi. He wasn't just the best player in the system. He was the system. He made positional play look personal, turned triangles into paintings, scored 50 goals a season without ever rushing a single one. You couldn't press him. You couldn't trap him. Because Messi wasn't just playing, he was preaching. It was more than football. It was jazz, improvised, intuitive, but grounded in structure. Notes only he could hear. And when he played, the whole world listened. A belief that began at La Masia, but by then, La Masia had become a whisper. The academy that built legends had nothing left to say. You can copy tactics. You can't copy soul. That's why the world studied Barcelona's blueprints and still failed. Because it wasn't just about space or passes. It was about faith. In each other. In ideas. In something bigger than winning. Cruyff planted it. Guardiola perfected it. Messi made it divine. And if you think only football looked like this, watch our documentary on the Edmonton Oilers. Gretzky didn't just skate fast. He saw space like Xavi. Passed like Iniesta. Moved like he knew the future. And like Barcelona, those Oilers didn't just win. They rewrote how the game could be played. Tiki-Taka wasn't a system, it was a philosophy, a revolution. And revolutions don't vanish, they echo.